Now let's see what the observations say about galaxy evolution. The simplest thing to do is take images at different wavelengths. That is observationally much cheaper than taking spectra, which require longer integration times. And this can be used to do galaxy counts as a function of their brightness, color, etc. But that can only go so far, and to really understand what's going on, redshifts really are necessary. So it was only in the recent years that we have obtained sufficiently large samples of galaxies in deep fields to really reach a good observational understanding of galaxy evolution. There is one important dichotomy. You can think of star formation as coming in two flavors. The simple, unobscured star formation, where you see the light from stellar photospheres as they are, or light absorbed and re-radiated by interstellar dust, which now moves all of the energy into far infrared or sub-millimeter regime. So there are two regimes in which we can observe galaxy evolution and star formation in them, and each of them has its own tools and selection effects and limitations. You may recall when we first mentioned source counts as a potential cosmological test that the evolutionary effects really mess things up. And they always work in the sense of making counts higher than they would be in the absence of the evolution. If the galaxies are evolving in brightness, say due to the fading of stellar populations, they were more luminous in the past, and therefore they would be at a higher magnitude level, but there would be many more of them. Thus, they'll be moving to the left and producing a less declining curve. Likewise, if galaxies are assembled from smaller pieces, there were more smaller pieces in the past, and exactly the same observational effect appears. To disentangle these, we need redshift surveys. Still here, the deep galaxy counts from one of the Hubble deep fields, and these days we can do this at about 29th magnitude or thereabouts, which is really spectacular. And by extrapolation over the entire sky, there are maybe a couple hundred billion galaxies within the observable universe. You may also recall that evolution is expected to appear stronger in bluer wavelengths and less so in redder, and that's indeed exactly what's seen here. Now, this is now infrared galaxy counts, and they show relatively minor discrepancy compared to the much stronger ones that are observable in the bluer parts of the spectrum. But as galaxies evolve, as their stellar populations evolve, their colors evolve too, generally going from bluer to redder. However, that's also complicated by the redshift. The whole spectral energy distribution is moving from bluer filters to the redder filters. So at any given time, you can look at color space and see what galaxies will do in there. Now, you can make use of their complex trajectories and use those to evaluate redshifts from colors alone. Those are so-called photometric redshifts. You can think of those as a really low-resolution spectroscopy. And they seem to work remarkably well. Typically, you need at least 4 or 5 different filters. And here are examples of some of the measurements. Those are the dots with error bars, with models of stellar populations drawn through them. This actually looks too good. And there could be many different models that can fit the same set of photometric measurements, but that can be also evaluated statistically. So here is a typical plot. Usually there is a really excellent agreement between spectroscopic redshifts done as a control and predicted photometric redshifts. The state of the art is that may be done to within a few percent. However, there are always outliers, galaxies for which a gross error is made, and that's usually due to something like presence of an active nucleus or some other peculiar happening like that. A particular form of photometric redshifts relies on the presence of deep jumps in the spectrum of a galaxy. There are a couple of those. There is the limit of the Balmer series of hydrogen, which then results in a step of a modest magnitude around 3,600 angstroms in the rest frame. So you can use that by measuring flux in filters blueward of that jump and redward of the jump. An even stronger effect occurs at the limit of the Lyman series, and those are extremely useful to find galaxies at very high redshifts. Moreover, for the reasons we'll be discussing later, intergalactic medium absorbs light blueward of Lyman alpha line, so it's really the wavelength of the Lyman alpha line that serves as an interesting jump point. This has been used to great effect, in particular by Steidel and collaborators, to discover large numbers of galaxies at high redshifts and then study their evolution and properties. But again, colors and magnitudes have their limitations, and redshifts are needed. So with the advent of 8-10 meter class telescopes like VLT in Chile or Keck telescopes in Hawaii and Subaru and so on, it became possible to actually do this in an effective way. Also, there was development of multi-fiber spectrographs, which you may recall also revolutionized redshift surveys at low redshift. And nowadays, thousands, hundreds of thousands of faint galaxy redshifts have been obtained. A good winning strategy is to obtain really deep images from space, where you don't have to worry about the effects of Earth's atmosphere. Images taken with Hubble can go much deeper than those taken from the ground, with a better resolution. And so there is a set of selected fields in the sky where very deep observations have been obtained. Hubble Deep Field was the first one, followed by the Ultra Deep Field and Chandra Deep Field and Extremely Deep Field. So these are the deepest windows in the universe we obtained so far. Once you have these images in a number of filters, you can deploy large telescopes to measure redshifts of as many galaxies as you possibly can. And that's still very much an ongoing enterprise in observational cosmology. Here is the first one of those, the Hubble Deep Field, with its characteristic B2 bomber shape, and the histogram of redshifts obtained with the Keck telescope. So even those were the deepest observations until then, the bulk of these galaxies is actually not at very high redshifts, about redshift a half. And they go beyond redshift of 1, but not by a lot. In subsequent work, pushing ever deeper, galaxies were found out to redshifts of 5 or even almost 6, but still the bulk of these, even at the limit of the present-day observations with 8 and 10 meter class telescopes, is of the order of unity or less. So we do not actually probe evolution of galaxies very deep through direct measurements. Small numbers we do see, but then one has to be aware of selection effects. The complete understanding is really at redshifts less than 1. This was done now by numerous groups, both in North and South, and tens of thousands of faint galaxy redshifts have been obtained. The results are usually in a really good mutual agreement. This one is from a pencil beam survey in the so-called Goods field, which is where Hubble Deep Field was, plus other observations surrounding it. And so here are a couple interesting diagrams. On the left, you see the redshift histogram, and it's very spiky. It's not spiky because it's noisy. It's spiky because of the large-scale structure, that the line of sight intersects filaments or even clusters and then voids, and that's what produces the observed distribution. On the right, you see absolute magnitude in the rest frame of galaxies plotted versus redshift. And you see there is a sharp cutoff that corresponds to magnitude limit. People who do these surveys decide that they can only go down to some magnitude level, let's say 24th magnitude. And that maps into different absolute magnitudes at different redshifts. So this is a built-in, but well understood selection effect. Nevertheless, one has to be aware of it. Naively, if you looked at this, you would conclude that galaxies at higher redshifts are more luminous. No, you simply only see the luminous ones at high redshift, and you're not seeing the fainter ones. So this was done for deep fields, and the results is as follows. Individual galaxies cannot be really compared. You need to look at the whole population, and the simplest description of the entire population is the luminosity function, distribution of galaxy luminosities. So if you look at that in different redshift shells, you find out that the observed galaxy luminosity function is very similar to the one we see near us. It evolves very slowly, but you begin to see a couple interesting effects. By about redshift of half or so, the faint end steepens. We see more evolution in intrinsically fainter galaxies. And second thing is that as you push deep enough, you start to see brightening at the bright end, which is what you expect from fading of stellar populations. The steepening was a little bit of a surprise. It was thought before that galaxies responsible for the excess counts in the deep skies, deep imaging, are evolving galaxies at larger redshifts. The bulk of them turn out to be dwarf galaxies at modest redshifts. And the evolution of galaxies depends very much on their intrinsic luminosity. This is known as the downsizing. And at face value, it's exactly opposite what you expect from hierarchical structure formation, where you slowly build up large galaxies. So you expect the larger galaxies to be evolving fastest. But it's exactly the opposite. Moreover, the evolution of the luminosity function depends on the galaxy morphology. And if you can split them in morphological types, say early and late type spirals and ellipticals, you find out that the later type galaxies, those further to the right on Hubble sequence, star-forming disks and irregulars, have the strongest evolution. Galaxies, the earlier part of the Hubble sequence, pretty much done their evolving by about redshift of 1. They do evolve since then, but bulk of the change occurs in the faint population and also the late Hubble types. It is only when we reach redshifts of the order of 2 and beyond that we start to see clear effects of strong evolution of stellar populations at the very bright end. So the generic conclusion these days is that most of the Hubble sequence was pretty much in place by about redshift of 1. And things have been evolving at a relatively modest pace since then. We'll see some other approaches to this a little later. Next, we will talk more about some of the observed results, as well as the evolution in clusters as opposed to the field, which is what we just talked about now.